Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance. All backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
On the Randomness of Nothing podcast, I have the pleasure of talking to a plethora of guests of different varieties and backgrounds, but very few people can say they save lives while also passing along business knowledge and then giving to others while doing it. And today's special guest, who took time out of his very busy schedule today, is Brad Newbury. He's a firefighter of 40 years. He's an EMT, and now he's the CEO and has been the CEO of National Medical and Education Training Center in West Bridgewater, Massachusetts. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate that introduction.
I kind of tripped over my words a bit, but you have a lot of accomplishments, and I think it's very important that every time somebody sees an ambulance or a fire truck go by, you may be inconvenienced at that red light, but that's a life on the line at that exact.
Certainly, we never know what is at the end of that 911 call.
Right.
But, there are times that there are non-emergencies and there are times there are critical emergencies. And yes, sometimes a life is in the balance and time is of the essence.
Absolutely.
And that's actually part of our book, I'm sure we'll get into, and we'll talk a little about it. But definitely time is of the essence. So I've had a great career in fire and EMS since I was a young volunteer at 16 years old.
Wow.
I just turned 56. Yes.
Yeah.
It's crazy that they would let 16-year-old kids crawl into building fires and fight fires. But there are still places in our country that do allow it. They do have firefighters that are young kids that are still that age. Yeah. But back in the mid-'80s, that was pretty routine. So, my career from there just continued to grow, and we'll get on to that journey.
I think what's amazing about that is even, I just took my kid to the pool, and then you have this, you have the lifeguards and everything like that. So a lot of times people segue from being like a lifeguard to eventually going into, because that's where a lot of teenagers do their summer jobs. And that's when you first learn about life-saving, attention to detail. You can't take your eye off the ball at all. So before we get into your books, and you're a 16-year-old kid, what kind of drove you into that field in particular?
Well, I had a family in the fire service. So my great uncle, my uncle were in the Fall River Fire Department. It's a small city here in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And my mom used to drop me off at the firehouse, and I got to ride along with the firefighters when I was a kid. Yeah. And that watching those men and seeing what they did every day, because back in the late 70s, early 80s, there were a lot of fires. Oh, and so these guys are going to fires constantly, and getting to ride along with them and go see what they actually do really inspired me. And just the camaraderie within the firehouse, their dedication to serving their community and saving lives was something that was instilled in me. Right. But even before that, my dad was a Force Recon Marine. So he was a Special Forces Marine during the Vietnam era. Yeah. And his entire life was built for service. He spent 10 years in the Marine Corps, but the Marines never left him until the day he died. And that's another wonderful story in our book. But he was 80 years old when he passed away, and he was serving every single day. So, those core values were instilled in me, and what I like to call the pearls of Marine Corps wisdom from my dad. And then as a young man, and then of course as a young firefighter, and particularly after I became a career firefighter and fire officer. And that's been every part of who I am has been built for service, including our business. Because as you know, business is about serving others too as well.
For sure. What's fascinating sometimes I think about a fire department is you kind of drive past it kind of you just drive past it and it doesn't even think twice about it, because sometimes it's so integrated in the community. You look at it as, that's the fire department building, not knowing that those people have to be ready at all times for whatever could be transpiring, right? So sometimes it's so part of your everyday lexicon, it doesn't even instill in you that they have to be ready for an emergency. Their equipment has to be ready. They have to be there. Like, I've listened to one of your videos, 6 minutes is a lifetime without oxygen, right? And, you're just like, wow, that's 360 seconds, right? And so you start calculating all that time where somebody is critical in their brain, they can lose all their functions from something like that. And so, again, you don't really think of time as an essence until you see what you do for a living. Now,
until you actually face that emergency, right?
Yeah.
So if it's either one of your loved ones who's dropped and went into cardiac arrest, didn't have a pulse, they're not breathing, that time is of the essence, right? That
Sure.
willingness to act, to step forward, to maybe even have some knowledge, skill, and ability.
Right.
But really, we talk about having that willingness to move forward. And so many times people don't. And that's when we arrive, we get there, people are standing there, bystanders standing there doing nothing.
Right.
And that time gap, that 6 minutes, and sometimes response times, depending on where you are in the country, can be even longer.
Absolutely.
People think because they live in a city that fire and EMS will be there very
Right.
quickly. And there's a lot of places around the country where, think about, I'm not sure where you live, but Boston, the traffic is incredible, right? Boston EMS does a great job. Boston Fire, they do the best that they can, but that 6 minutes is being eaten up by traffic, by time on the road. And then, now as you get beyond that, then what kind of clinical outcome will happen at the end of that call?
Right.
Will that patient survive or not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So obviously we want to get into your academy and your books as well too. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to segue into your building of your academy. I believe you said it started in 2010 from what I looked up, and your training center for paramedics and EMSs, and allowing people to have access who may not have had it before. And then we can segue into your books if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Okay.
I've been a paramedic educator. So I've been a paramedic since I went to paramedic school in 1989. And I always say I don't look that old, but the reality is I was 20 years old when I graduated from paramedic school.
Yeah.
And my favorite line is I could give drugs, but I couldn't drink alcohol. So the last 36 years I've been a paramedic, and I've worked in very busy, both in an urban setting and suburban setting as well. And one of the things that I saw was this gap in the way that back in the early 2000s there was a gap in the way that paramedic education was being delivered. We didn't have the national accreditation standards that we have now that we're held to. So we are
Really?
yeah. So back in the day, there were they existed, but they weren't mandatory. And so of course, if it's not mandatory, no one's doing it. I mean, the paramedic school I went to, was held in the basement of a emergency management building in the city of New Bedford. And, and it was piecemealed, and not that it was bad education, it was great education, but it wasn't like an institution. It wasn't like a school that we have here now. And it was, so I saw this gap in the way that education was being delivered, but I also saw the gap in the way that the individuals being taught. And,
Got it.
And some of them were coming out with maybe missing some significant pieces, not always on the medicine side, but definitely on the value side and the way that they took care of people. And so I definitely identified this gap. And I started teaching a paramedic program for someone else because I just wanted to give, I wanted to serve, I wanted to give back. And I knew that I had all this great experiences and education and knowledge, and I wanted to share that with our profession.
Yeah.
And so I began doing that. And in 2005, I had a young woman who came to me I was teaching a refresher class. EMTs and paramedics, like nurses, have to have continuing education every couple of years.
Right.
And so I was teaching a continuing education class, and this young woman came to me and she said, hey, I really want to be a paramedic. She was an EMT. She's like, do you have any alternatives for me to come to paramedic school? She knew I taught the local paramedic program, and it was kind of a traditional paramedic program. You come into class and then we have labs. It was a brick and mortar style. It's 2005. Right. And so I said to her, well, tell me more. Why do you need an alternative? And she's like, well, I'm a single mom. I have 5 children. My husband left me. He doesn't support me. I live with my mom, and I work, 60 to 80 hour work weeks, trying to make enough money to pay for my family. She's like, but I really want to be a paramedic. I want to take care of people at a higher level. And just for your audience, an EMT has about 120 hours of training, maybe like our program's 200 hours, but that's not the standard across the country. But a paramedic has about 1,200 hours. So it's 10 times, almost 10 times more than a typical. And there's a big variation in what the skill level, knowledge, and things that we could do as a paramedic that the EMTs can't do. And so, knowing knowing your provider, who's coming to your house is going to make a big difference in the availability of type of care that they can provide for you and your family.
Correct. Yeah.
So after having this conversation with this young woman, I remember
the light bulb went off.
What's that?
The light bulb went off.
Well, I was driving home that night, and her story really resonated with me on, like there are so many barriers to that young woman coming to paramedic school. And I remember thinking, like, how can I help her? And I drove home and I started really thinking about it. I walked in my house, and my wife, who is a co-founder of our school, she's also a nurse practitioner. But at the time, she was doing her bachelor's degree in nursing at UMass Boston online.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, if we're training nurses this way, why can't we do this for paramedics? And it's, in 2026, it doesn't seem like a very novel idea, but 20 years ago,
oh my gosh,
there was nobody doing it, right?
Oh, not at all.
Not at all. So I had to go through this incredible process of figuring this out, and I had to figure this problem out, right? Like, the bigger problems you solve, the more your business will grow.
Right.
And so I saw this as a big problem, and I went on this journey. It took me about a year to get approval, get our state accreditation, and
right.
And in 2007, I launched the first online hybrid paramedic program in the country.
Man, that's amazing. It's amazing.
And so after I was able to convince our state Department of Health, because they regulated our EMS programs, to allow me to do a pilot program for 2 cohorts of students. And I did the pilot program. We had an incredible success rate. Our state loved what we were doing.
Right.
I gave them access to our learning management system. I had to build out a learning management system. We used a virtual classroom. It's very, it's ubiquitous now, right? Like everybody has a Zoom, or even, we're on Riverside.
Right.
But back then, there was only, 2 or 3 virtual classrooms. We used a product called Illuminate. I don't even think they're out there anymore. But so once I got that approval, students started finding our website from around the country and asking, hey, can I join this?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. And so I went back to our state. I was like, one, is it legal? Am I going to break any laws?
Exactly.
And so in 2009, I launched the first national and international. We actually had some foreign students too as well that joined our program. So we had students from all over the country and around the world.
Yeah.
And we had incredible successes.
That's
I was
amazing.
just I wasn't an entrepreneur. Honestly, I'm a teacher. I wasn't planning on being an entrepreneur. But the guy that I was working for, the school that I was working for, he screwed me and didn't pay my contract.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Right. And so he didn't pay my contract. And I like to say, like World War II, like Tanaka said, we woke the sleeping giant. And because I'm now incredibly motivated and mad.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right. And it was, it was a really rough time on me and my family. And
of course.
So, and it was a lot of money, tens of thousands of dollars.
And then on top of the money, you have people depending on you now in this institution, right? So
100%. Because the guy that owned it wasn't even a paramedic, so he couldn't teach.
Bingo.
And everyone's calling me. This whole thing's falling apart. I'm trying to help them as much as I can. And I supported my students through it, despite my lawyers telling me, like, you can't help them. And I'm like, I got to help them.
Beautiful.
And so in 2010, we opened our own school. And we immediately, because I had some great relationships along the way. I went to work for Elsevier Publishing, one of the major medical textbook publishing companies out there. They saw what I was doing, and they hired me as a faculty educator, because they were like, how did you learn to use our learning management system? And it was the funniest conversation with the publisher, because the woman, they flew me out to Las Vegas, and I'm sitting there, and the woman says, how did you learn to do all this? And I said, well, I just read your manual.
Exactly.
and she said, she's like, Brad, no one reads the manual. I said, well, I did, and I had to, because I had problems. I had to figure it out. So that's when that entrepreneurial journey really began, was in 2010, and really solving large problems. Right. And then so we actually, in the very beginning, had a partnership with the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio.
Amazing
relationships down there, and they put their name on us, which I credit them and the folks at UT, Dr. Villers and Leslie Hernandez. They helped us, literally just putting their name on us made a huge difference, right? And we were helping them in certain ways, so it was a win-win for everybody around it. But our company grew rapidly.
Amazing.
And then in 2014, all while, by the way, I continued to work as a career fire officer.
Oh my gosh!
Right, and I was going to school. I was getting my degree. And so I still continued as we built this business. I have 3 kids, a great wife, and so entrepreneurs are different people. I'm sure you figure that out, right? Like, that. And,
yes.
As an entrepreneur, like we are driven in so many ways. And I was driven, listen, I'm super competitive, right? I'm a firefighter. We don't want to ever lose, right?
Of course not.
And,
of course not.
We're not going to the fire and be like, no, we can't do that. It's
Man,
just, right? Like, it's just not in us. So, as an entrepreneur, but as a firefighter and a paramedic, failure was not an option.
Of course.
Believe me, in the very beginning of our business, you want to talk about like risk. My wife and I liquidated all of our assets. We took no loans. We went all in, and I had 2 months worth of rent payment. The building that we were in, the space that we had rented, leased for 5 years, was $6,000 a month.
Oh my gosh!
I didn't even make $6,000 a month, Rashad. It was, and I had 2 months worth of rent payment
with the hopes
bank,
that, with the hopes that
go make this work. Right. I mean, you talk about, I always, I have this saying, sometimes we're building the runway as we're landing the plane. And that's exactly what we were doing. So in 2010, we opened the doors, took a big risk. And that first year we were actually profitable and paid ourselves back our initial investment.
But that's amazing.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, but those are the things that most people aren't willing to do. And I was just going to give you credit for taking that risk, because the average person and the average wife, that's just not in the cards.
My wife said to me, she gave me one piece of advice. Don't lose the money. Like, that was her. That was it. That's what she said to me. Don't lose the money. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to lose the money. And she was like, okay. And, but you have to take risks. And I took a risk with a parachute, by the way, right? Like, I set up and let's not kid anybody. And as a corporation, if I failed, I certainly didn't want to do this, but I also knew that, I was also kind of financially protected. I would have lost my entire investment and that kind of thing. But I also had another job.
Right.
I was still working full time as a career firefighter, right? As a fire officer. So I still had a parachute in a sense.
Right.
But still, that would have crippled my wife and I. And then we were also personally on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars in some of the stuff that we had done. So it would have crippled us, and probably would have taken us years to crawl out of that debt if we had to. Right. So it was a risk. However, it paid off. I had also seen what I was doing in the industry. It wasn't like I just said, hey, I got this crazy idea, let's go do it. I mean, I already had 3 years of great programs and students knocking on the door. And so, we knew it was going to work. And we grew rapidly from 2010 to 2014. In 2014, actually, in an all-stock sale, I sold it to a private equity group, like the American Dream, right?
Yeah. It's beautiful.
And so, it's an incredible story at the end of the day, but I was really naive to those folks' business. They actually had a private college in their portfolio. Okay. And so they wrapped us into this private college group. And it was terrible. It was one of the worst decisions. I say it was the worst decision that I ever made. It was and it wasn't. I learned so much.
Right.
Because 2 years later, I leveraged them and forced them to give it back.
Wow.
Oh, because it's whatever. It back.
Yeah. Oh.
No money exchange.
Wow.
So they paid me a bunch of money for it, and they abused it, and then they gave it back, no money exchange. It was, like I said, we don't have time on this podcast, but it's a heck of a business story and one of perseverance and dedication to our mission here. We were wounded in a number of ways by these folks. Private equity is very, very difficult because I found at least this company, and I can't say for every private equity group out there, but this organization, they're driven by money, period. Right? They don't care about people, and we are a people business. Right.
Particularly
we're mission driven because the students, and I have on every email I send, at the bottom of the email it says NMETC education trained EMTs and paramedics so that future lives may be saved. Right. And we know that, that's the North Star here at our organization, is we know that the decisions and the education is going to go out and take care of people. Our students are going to go out and take care of people, and patient care matters. Right. So that is a very high standard for us here that we set for not only us as an organization, but for our students too as well.
Without question. And, I think that when I looked at what you accomplished and how novice the idea of an online course was in 2005. I couldn't help but think, I was graduating from college then when I graduated from Michigan State. And then Facebook came out in 2004, like the year before that. And it was like, oh, like this online thing, you're still using a desktop. It wasn't there was no online courses when I was at State, that I knew of at least. Everything was in person. Everything was course instructed. So really to actually, sell your health department and various things across the nation, for you young people, this is the norm. For us, I'm 43. And I'll tell you, even like 20 years ago, that just wasn't part of the everyday lexicon that people did. It was still novice to do that. Amazon wasn't profitable for the first 10 years of its existence because this just wasn't the thing that people made an everyday part of their lives. I think your academy is absolutely stellar, and the relationships that you built are absolutely phenomenal and foundational. Can you briefly talk about the training and the certification before we get into your books?
Sure. So at our institution, NMETC is one of the largest EMS education institutions in the country. We've graduated north of 12,000 students over the years.
That's amazing.
And we have an incredible staff here that educates and trains our students. And from an entrepreneurial standpoint, is that your major audience part? It's like, can you start up, grow a business, and then be in a role in your business where you're like, I don't have duties in our business every day as the CEO of the company. My role is as the brand ambassador. Of course I manage the financials, but I have an amazing team. I have a chief operating officer who, by the way, is an incredible story, like a young woman who started in our business literally answering the phones at the front desk and grew into our chief operating officer.
Unbelievable.
So all the women out there, who are seeing that, incredible story, smart young lady, great leader. She's only 34 years old and she runs our company every day.
That's amazing.
And so, now we have 75 full and part-time employees, and we have a large space. And our goal is to ensure that the education that we deliver here is pushed out not only around the country but around the world. Along the way, we started teaching some students from Iceland, and we became the primary paramedic program for Iceland.
Jeez.
Yes, yeah.
That's amazing.
We have students from all over North America, as far away as Alaska. And then throughout the Caribbean and into Europe. And so we've had some amazing students come here. And I always say I'm a true stakeholder in the education that I deliver. Where do you live, Krisha?
Just outside of Detroit.
We have students absolutely that have, well, actually, Michigan is one of those states that where we don't have students in Michigan, but I know we have graduates that have moved into that area. But I say I'm a true stakeholder of the education we deliver here because former graduates of our program have taken care of my mom, my dad, my son, both my in-laws, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law. My dad suffered an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
And one of our, which is a great story in our book, and one of our graduates was at his cardiac arrest and helped him survive.
All new drinks are now at McDonald's, with refreshers like the strawberry watermelon refresher and the mango pineapple refresher with popping boba, to crafted sodas like the Sprite Berry Blast with berry flavors and cold foam. Who knew ice cold drinks could be so fire? 6 all-new drinks are here, now at McDonald's.
Refreshers contain caffeine.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
That's amazing. That's
right?
absolutely amazing.
So to
And
me,
that's
go ahead.
And that's all because in 2007, that 2000 time, where you had a chance to quit and you didn't. And it's like it's a full circle moment, really.
Absolutely. And that's really I think the biggest part is if your mission and your why is strong enough, you can persevere through anything.
Yeah.
And my why, I think Simon Sinek stole my idea on Start With Why. I'm just teasing. But I literally have been asking that question to paramedic students since day one that I've been teaching in paramedic school, starting back in 2004. I literally have a presentation day one of paramedic school, and I would ask everybody, why are you here?
Right.
Why are you here? What's driving them to go take care of people? What's the major motivation? And it's so funny. I always ask the question, how many people want to make more money? And in the beginning, and again, but nobody raises their hand because they feel like, I'm standing up there. I want to hear that they just have this passion to take care of people, and it doesn't matter about the money.
Yeah.
Money does matter, right?
Of course it does. Absolutely. Without question.
There has to be a return on your investment for education too as well. And paramedic school is about 11, 12, like our institution, I think it's about 11,500 or something, almost $12,000. Yeah. But in the first year of of becoming a paramedic, you're gonna make that return on that investment first year and more. And I always say to people, you never know where your life is going to go, right? If someone said to you 10 years ago, hey, you're going to run a podcast, you're going to do the things that you're doing.
I'm what, man?
No way, right? There's no absolutely, you couldn't even fathom it. You couldn't think of it.
No chance.
So one of my favorite saying to my students too is one interaction with one person can change your life. You just never know it.
Right.
And sometimes that window of opportunity only opens a small amount. Right. You just have to have the intestinal fortitude to throw that window open. You sure do. Through it, right?
Absolutely. And and this is the beauty of being the podcaster, right? Like I've said this to other guests, I don't save lives. So like my pressure and your pressure and that of the students, the pressures of your students and all, like I just get to talk to people. So like there's no excuse for me not to plow through and do interviews and talk to people because I don't deal in life and death. And so but that doesn't mean I didn't have the will to start. So my world that I live in is a nice little bubble of safety, right? So I thank you all for putting your students, your wife, and everybody who's involved with your organization, because I don't save lives. So, you're here. I'm the guy talking to people. But that doesn't mean I didn't have the will to try something.
Listen, I am a regular guy just like you are. Like, don't put me on any pedestal, right? Like, we are equal folks, right? We just have different paths in life. Yeah. And I can always go back. We look at that and we say, you say to yourself, okay, I just talked to people. But that's important too, because when someone comes onto a podcast or listen to a podcast, you're teaching into those folks, especially if they want to listen. Right. You're teaching in. You could easily have a guest on that changes someone's life. You'll never know it, right? So you don't know what the ripple effect of that is going to be. But that, here I am. Who knows? Maybe one of your podcast listeners says, hey, you know what? I probably should get trained, or I wanted to become an EMT, or I want to become a paramedic. Yeah. And now all of a sudden they join our institution, and then that changes they save a life, right? They go on and save a life, and think of all of a sudden now that life is lived because they listen to a podcast, they got some education, they got some knowledge and skill, and they saved a life. So you don't put yourself in different categories. Like and it's not just you, it's everybody, right? Like you have your own path, and you're changing people's lives every day by talking, and I see that. I
appreciate that very much. Can we talk briefly about your authorship, your books, and then how you don't need me, people don't, but just for the purpose of the show, how people can find you. It looks like, First Responder Advantage and The Saved Effect.
So the First Responders Advantage, that first book came about because, I've gained so many experiences along our journey in our business, right? I mean, we think about this, like if you were to go to get an MBA, what do they teach you? They teach you how to start, how to write a business plan, how to start a company, how to grow the company, how to exit the company, right? That's what basically they teach you in business.
Right.
So I started a company, grew the company, exited the company, took it back. So really started again. And I went literally from I was the single employee in April 1st, 2010, the biggest April Fool's joke I ever played to myself. The day we opened the company. I remember sitting there. I was all alone. I'm behind the desk in my office, like head in hand, like, what did I just do? I literally had $12,000 in the bank. We had no money. And I'm sitting behind my desk, and I was like, I got to get on the phone. I got to start sending emails. I got to start grinding. I got to get students in here. And so but then that journey has now come to, here we are. We serve so many students from all over the country. We have a fairly large staff for an EMS institution. Believe me, we are there's a few other folks that are probably as large as us, or maybe even a little bit bigger, but there's not many of us. I mean, like on one hand, probably
that's amazing.
In the top 3, maybe, right? So and so when we look at the amount of impact that we have had over the years, and where our students are, and the impact that those students are having, and how they're changing people's lives, it is absolutely amazing. So the journey from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I learned so much. And I had 2 young firefighters on my shifts, Corbett and Joey. They came to me like, hey, Cap, can you help us start a business? And I was like, yeah. I mean, I had been mentoring some other folks, other firefighters in business. And so like I have two wonderful guys that are good friends. I've been meeting with for breakfast like once a month for a number of years. And they started a company. They grew that. They have, multi-families. And I have, along the way, been with them side by side. They were actually 2 of my students years ago. And but anyway, so these 2 young firefighters came to me, and I said, all right, listen, I got some time on Thursday. Come by the school. We'll sit and actually one of them is a graduate of our program. I said,
amazing.
We'll sit. We'll talk about it, right? So they came in, and I said, okay, where are you now in the process of your business? And they said, what do you mean? I said, okay, how did you form your company? Like what? Like, yeah, we don't know anything. What do you mean?
Oh,
and I was like, okay. And see, almost every, like if you were to go talk to firefighters or EMS people or even cops, many of them have a side hustle.
Of course.
Right? Because you cannot, I mean, very, very few people, you have to work so many hours of overtime. And a lot of times it's just not available. As a public safety officer, it's really difficult to reach full financial freedom in life, doing what we do.
That's why they do private events. That's why they do security. That's why they do, other different.
They do construction. They do, all these other jobs that on the side. So they all, because I have a great schedule, right? I mean, I work 24-hour shifts. So I work 124 on, 124 off, 124 on, 5 days off. Right. But I do 48 hours in every week. Plus, sometimes you're getting held or whatever. I'm usually working more than that.
Right.
But we do it compressed in a compressed amount of time. So it does give us time off to do other things. Right. And most of us have a side hustle. Right. And what I was seeing, though, is that many of the firefighters that I was talking to and knew, they didn't understand business. Yeah. They could go out and serve people in different ways, maybe build a porch, do something, but they didn't know what they were doing in business. And neither did I. When I first started, I like to say, like, hear our Boston accent. I have a confused accent, by the way. I have a Rhode Island. I grew up in Rhode Island, so I have this Rhode Island, Massachusetts confused accent. But I used to say, like, in Boston, we'd say, I had to go out and learn about business. So I had to get wicked smart very quickly, right? And
I thought of The Departed and Matt Damon when I heard that.
I bet you did. And you hear my kids, it's even worse.
Oh, my God.
It was funny. I was just recording the audiobook, and the producer says to me, I love listening to your Boston accent. I said, it's not quite Boston. It's mixed, but it's okay. But anyway, having these 2 young men sit with me and spend the day with me, and I help them literally like how to form your company, go from like, should they do an LLC or an S Corp, and from a partnership, and then what was their product and services. And then we literally built a small business plan for them, not anything complicated, not something that you'd do in business school, but literally like a 2-pager that they could just create a vision and we could move on. Right. So as they left that day, I sat there and I said, I have gained all this great knowledge. And as a teacher, I can easily teach things into other folks, right? I mean, I've had many, more than 20 years as an educator. Yeah. And I said, I need to codify this. I need to write it down. I need to share it with other first responders. So my first book, The First Responder Advantage, is really about helping fire and EMS folks and police officers start up and grow their business. And I think that we as first responders have a real advantage in business. One is not only our motivation, but we see the world much differently than you. I've been trained differently than you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
no question.
And the way that I make decisions, and I always say, I have to make high-level cognitive decisions in extremis when time is of the essence.
Right. Right.
And many times in business, we actually have discretionary time, but I can use the frameworks that I learned how to make decisions, especially now. My role is as an incident commander. So we go to a fire tomorrow. I'm on shift tomorrow, and it's going to be almost 100 degrees. So the likelihood of us having a major incident is legitimate, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go to work tomorrow, and I may command an incident. And it's very interesting, particularly like we go to a fire. The first thing I have to do is I have to build a team around us, right? So that we go to the fire, whatever resources I have in my department is finite.
Right.
And if the incident is more than the resources I have to build a team.
Right.
And the same thing in business. Think about that, right? Like when you're get to a point in business where the amount of customers that you have are overwhelming the support that you have within your organization, you have to build a bigger team.
Without question.
But so very quickly, we have to build a bigger team, and that sometimes might even bring in mutual aid fire departments in.
Right.
And then I have to have tasks for those individuals, and I have to make that up on the fly.
Right.
And sometimes, when I think about that and I equate that to business, one of the things I have to build immediately is a rapid intervention team. So if my firefighters get in trouble, right, and they need help, I have to have a team behind. So I started really thinking about how can we put these frameworks together in business, and what advantages do we have as first responders in the way that we see the world?
Right.
And how does that help me? And actually, I created a framework around. So I have a framework that we're writing our next book around, but I give a talk on it, and really think about mitigate to elevate, right? Mitigation is lessen the impact.
Yes.
How do you elevate your business around lessening the impact of growth? And that's a kind of a framework I have that I've already set in motion, and we're going with that. But the interesting part about that first responders advantage was the way, and a lot along the way also, I learned so many lessons. I told some of those stories in that book about the lessons that I learned here at NMETC. And so that led me into, our next book so that book is a great little business book for, folks who are, and it could be for anybody. It doesn't have to just be first responders. I talk to first responders in there, but I think it's because, that's who I originally has as the audience is. And I forget who said it, right? Rory Vaden says it, right? He says that, you're best to serve the person you once were, right? So that,
beautiful.
So that's a Rory Vaden quote. I don't know if you know Rory and AJ Vaden and their business brand building.
You're going to make me look it up. That's for sure.
Great folks. Rory says it all the time, right? You're best to serve the person that you once were. So here I am as a young firefighter who is starting a business, and I didn't know anything. So I'm going out serving them.
Yeah, beautiful.
Our next book really is a self-actualization book in a sense. Yeah. Where and I don't want your audience to take that wrong. It's more of a mission-driven book. And so I had this idea. You ever hear before we get into the story, I was teaching a class into all of our graduates, a talk called "What Does It Mean to Save a Life?" And truly, what does it mean to save a life? Like, what is the impact that we as EMS providers have on that individual? And it really revolves around a story, one of the stories in the book about this gentleman, Frank Nagel. And I was involved in Frank's resuscitation. My partner and I, Frank went into cardiac arrest 5 separate times in the back of our ambulance, and we shocked him. And by the time we got to the hospital, Frank was alive and awake. And you have to understand, let's put this in perspective. This was 1994. And through this incredible circumstances, we later on learned that Frank was the uncle of one of the firefighters I was working with. And for years, I didn't know it. I started in this department, and then literally within months, we figured this out. And the guy, Jim Curtin is his name. Jim's the firefighter. He's about to retire with our department. Jim every year hosts a party for the family and the fire department, like a 4th of July party, but not on the 4th, sometime in July. And we're actually coming up on, so I'll get to see the Nagel family very soon here.
Beautiful.
But the funny part of that whole thing was a year after Frank had survived, his family invited us, my partner and I, to what I call the Thank God Dad's Alive party.
Oh my goodness.
So a year after Frank had survived, they invited us to a party at their house to celebrate Dad's 1-year anniversary of being alive.
Beautiful.
And what I, so that's later. So that's how I get to meet his family. And then they recognize his son, Chris, was in the firehouse, and I came around the corner. There he was. Right. So now we put all the pieces together. And every year since that year, since 1998, I stayed connected with Frank. Frank lived another 25 years.
Unbelievable.
Post-resuscitation, right?
Unbelievable.
And so I teach into our students about, you're not just saving that life. You're saving
time after.
Absolutely. Of everything that comes after.
Right.
So I really started thinking about, I was teaching that class, and then there was another gentleman, and believe me, this book is not about me. It's not about like, hey, I've done all these things. It is not. Right. But I was involved in another resuscitation of another guy who lived 27 years.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that on your LinkedIn page.
Yes. John, we did more than 30 minutes of CPR on John. And which in our world usually has a fairly negative outcome.
Right.
And John spent 2 weeks in a coma, and he woke up and went home to his family, neurologically intact, no deficit, and lived for 27 more years.
Right. And he got 27 more years from his family because of what you guys did. And
it wasn't just us, though. Right. The big point of that story was there were two bystanders. You talked you opened the podcast about the 6 minutes, right? You started talking about the 6 minutes. And that 6 minutes is that relationship between when someone drops, someone calls 911, and the first responders get there. Right. And sometimes it's more than 6 minutes, right?
Yes, for sure.
And then how can we fill the gap? How can we bridge the gap and save that life? And there were two bystanders that day that stepped out. He was on the dance floor in the Polish Club in Abington, Massachusetts at a dance on a Saturday night. And two bystanders stepped forward and immediately started CPR on the dance floor.
Amazing.
This was 1997, right? So two bystanders came out and started CPR right away. Mm-hmm. And as I wrote in the book, they were doing great CPR when we showed up, right?
Beautiful.
And in the story, I'll let your readers go and read it, because this is an incredible book, an emotional book, one that'll really touch your heart. Cool. And do you know CPR?
I took it in college. I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to act like no, I don't. That's a yes or no question.
Well, listen, you had a course. You probably have some memory, right?
Yeah.
And literally 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So I could bring that right back to you.
Yeah.
And so, I think this is where the mission behind the book is to inspire individuals to get trained in CPR and be ready and willing to act, because there's a psychology around stepping forward.
Absolutely.
And do you see yourself as the one, right?
Right.
Do you see yourself as the person who would step forward? So when you think about, the premise of the book too is about the ripples that we create around saving a life. And so I wrote the book with my daughter, Kira.
Beautiful.
Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today, but because she originally had planned to, but she couldn't be here. Yeah, and the reason I brought Kira into this was because she has her own story. She's been around our EMS education school since she was 2. Right? She became CPR certified when she was 8.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing.
At 8 years old, she became CPR certified. She had, I won't tell her story because she has a great story.
That's amazing.
But she also worked for the last 3 years at one of the largest trauma centers here in Boston, and in the emergency room. And so she had her own experiences. She's an EMT as well. And I think one of the, as I asked her if she would write this book with me, I also wanted to be able to, she's a great writer. She had a minor in writing in college, and I could see that. But so she actually, as we started on this journey, she was the one who came up with the name of the book. So
amazing.
Have you ever heard of the butterfly effect?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right, that theoretical that if a butterfly in South America flaps its wings, it could create a tornado in Texas, right?
Yes.
And really, it's about the ripples that are created, and we never know where that effect is going to go. What effect would that butterfly have on the weather pattern, right? We just
Exactly.
But so the name of the book's called The Saved Effect.
Right.
Around that theory that when a life is saved, we never know where the ripples are going to go from that individual, that life that was saved.
Yeah, that's
some amazing stories in this book.
That's deep, because you don't know that life that got saved could have been the police officer that got back to to save a life, or that EMT or that firefighter that was saved, or that woman that gave birth.
By the way.
Yeah, I literally had no idea. It just came off the top of my head because, the will to act and having the skills and because you really don't know when a tragedy is actually going to occur. And, sometimes we flippantly say, to a friend, like, man, nothing better ever happened to you. I ain't giving you CPR, because you just kind of joke and flippantly say that. I'm not giving you mouth to mouth. But like realistically, like that can happen in an instance, right? Yes. And your mind has to flip to like, oh my gosh, this really is an emergency, right? And so, full disclosure, I think I screwed up my movie quote too. That wasn't Matt Damon from The Departed. I think that was Good Will Hunting. So when he said Wicked Smart, I said that was burning in the back of my mind.
Okay.
Like, I don't want your Boston listeners to be like, who is this guy quoting our stuff?
They stopped listening after they heard Matt Damon. They're just like, oh, Matt Damon. All right, whatever. He's.
Oh, I got tickets to the Odyssey coming soon. So I will say, your life and your journey is not encompassed in this short amount of time that I've had the pleasure of interviewing you. But for the sake of this program, where can people find Brad Newbury and your wonderful company that you have established in the national accreditation that you?
So you can find me at bradnewbury.com.
Yes.
I have a personal brand website. Mm-hmm. You can also find our book at thesavedeffect.com. Mm-hmm. If you just went to bradnewbury.com, there's a link there. Mm-hmm. And our school is NMETC.com.
Okay, got it.
So I can make sure you have those links. We can put them in the show notes for you and your listeners.
Yeah. And so, and I appreciate the kind words that you guys have had about my show, and the fact that you reached out to me. I can't thank enough, because I'm just somebody who wants to get the messages out, and it's great that you're a force for good. You've established a business, and entrepreneurship, from all the people that I've talked to, is really just following a passion and finding the people who are passionate about something. It usually transforms into a business, right? So. Absolutely. Right. So you've had your life's passion, and then one thing led to another. And sometimes people only see the final, product of this great institution, but they didn't see those lonely nights at the kitchen table where you're just trying to figure it out. Right. Yep. And it's something beautiful about those stories, because it encourages people who are listening to sit back and say, it's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be difficult. And if you can make sure that you stick it out, good things can happen on the back end. And I want to thank you personally for the lives you saved and touched, and also being on the show.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on your podcast.
I look forward to, hearing wonderful stories about the lives you've saved. So thank you, Brad Newbury, for being on the Randomness from Nothing podcast.
All right, thank you.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls, and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.